All right, should we get started?
Let's do it.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. We're excited to have everybody here today. Our virtual event. I think this is our second official virtual event. Obviously, with HQ as a physical connecting and convening space, we're not able to do that right now. So my team has been working extremely hard and trying to offer value virtually. And we hope to do more of this type of event. So big thanks to my team and thanks to everyone for joining. So how do we come up with this event today? You know, obviously I think it's very relevant for the times. As I'm thinking about my, you know, what I'm going through right now with HQ's business model being turned on its side and the PPP and having to pay our bills and having employees to worry about and companies that I've invested in that are struggling and a community of entrepreneurs that are you know, looking for guidance and information. You know, it's pretty tough, and that doesn't even include family members that are ill that we're helping out. You know, my daughter that's 5 that's home and doesn't understand why mommy and daddy are always on the phone. You know, so it's tough. But on the other side of things, you know, morale on the team is high. You know, we're learning to communicate, and I would say even further developing our relationships. We're looking for ways to improve our organization that are going to benefit us long term. You know, we're continuing to progress in a difficult time. And I don't know why, but I'm extremely optimistic about the future. And I think events like this are really important because, you know, you can feel alone, you can feel on an island, and that's what a community is all about. So during difficult times, you know, how do we stay strong? How are we resilient? You know, how are we helping each other? And I hope that HQ can continue to do its part in reaching out and being a good steward to the community. We've got a great group of panelists here today to help us talk through this idea of being strong during tough times. We've got a couple moderators here, Justin and Dave. How you doing, guys?
Great.
Doing great.
Jess and I had an opportunity to have a conversation with these guys the other day, and it was a lot of fun. So I think you'll see a lot of that. But you know, what we're trying to do is none of us pretend to have all the answers. But what we'd like to do is we'd like to reflect back on our experiences as business people and entrepreneurs through the years. You know, I know a number of us have, you know, had businesses over 9/11 and the financial crisis in 2008. And so while not the same, I think we can reflect back on some of those things. So with that, I'm looking forward to the discussion. Let me introduce our 2 moderators. We've got Dave and Justin. They've got a podcast called the Enlightrepreneurs. And they're here basically to help purpose-driven entrepreneurs evaluate their lives, businesses, and the world. Dave Gold is an author, formerly a trial attorney. We will not hold that against you.
I'm a recovering trial attorney.
He's a business consultant. You know, some of you may know that he's a founder of several businesses. He has 40 plus years in helping purpose-driven entrepreneurs and professionals. And, you know, we enjoy his work and we're happy you're here. And then we've got Justin. You know, Justin and I have just met each other, but this guy is one of the more charismatic guys I've met. He's an author, a speaker. I guess he has chickens. So you have chickens in your...
I do. So I'm coming to you live from my coffee shop. This is Dolia Coffee here, and I have chickens out in the yard. So I had to close the door so that they wouldn't get in here during the interview.
And we joked earlier, it'd be really cool to have a chicken, you know, photobomb our session here, but we'll see.
Would have been great.
Anyways, in all seriousness, you know, he's a speaker, he's an entrepreneur. He's really passionate about, you know, helping purpose-minded ventures scale, and he's a co-founder of the Enlightrepreneurs as well. Thanks, guys, for agreeing to moderate today. And then we've also got Bill Sprull and Jes Lipson as well. As most of you know, Jes Lipson is a co-founder with me with HQ. On a personal note, I've got to say, especially in times like this, Jes is often one of the wisest guy in the room. He's a guy that I regularly go to as a sounding board and for advice, and it's much appreciated in this time of need. These guys have got a little bit of a storybook to him, and some of you know his story, but he's self-taught software developer. I don't know if you wear a hoodie back then, but you definitely fit the prototype of a 23-something-year-old entrepreneur. Jes is known for founding ShareFile back in 2005. That was acquired by Citrix in 2011. That big building that we have in the warehouse district and the thousands of employees that work there, Jes was a big part in helping develop that. And then most recently, Jes is the founder of a company called Levitate, which helps small business grow and manage their professional relationships and help drive referral and word of mouth. And then there's Bill Sprull. There was a period of time I feel like I was hearing Bill's name every day in HQ. The amount of people that I know that Bill has helped, whether that's mentorship or as an angel investor or just as a good guy, I think the list is long. Bill and I just developed a relationship. He's on the board of Innovate Raleigh with me. And again, he's one of these guys, when he speaks, you listen. He's the co-founder of the Global Data Consortium. It's a digital identity verification platform. Bill's also an active investor in the local community and angel. And Bill, we're happy to have you here too. And then there's me. I'm one of the founders of HQ. I also founded a company called RevGen. And I've owned a number of businesses through the years, and I think I can bring some perspective to some of the more service-minded businesses, restaurants, real estate, and those types of things for those that are interested. So with that, I'm gonna pass the baton to guys that are much more interesting as moderators. So Dave and Justin, why don't you all take it from here?
Dave, you're up.
I'm up. Okay. So I'm going to start off, first of all, that one of our missions, we have such parallel missions that have really aligned in this moment because everyone is so focused in terms of figuring out what are the qualities, what are the techniques, what are the characteristics that will get us through, not just get us through this, but get us through with our integrity attack and also position going forward. And so we get to interview all kinds of really phenomenal people, just like Jesse and Jason we did. And it's all over the place. I mean, some of it's really practical. We've had Tom Ferguson of Rise Biscuits went through his P&L sheet for restaurants. Said, pay this, don't pay that. We had Ryan Diener that was helping people fill out the forms for the PPP and the SBA loans. And then we also have people, we've had shamans, we've had astrologers, we have all kinds of people to help us through there. And what we've noticed is we're always got our ears perked. What's the common denominator? What is it that these people have that we know they're going to succeed? That they're, charismatic was a word I used for Justin, that irrespective of their personalities, they're just really, really good people. And we noticed that what these people are is they are good-hearted and not just like good, like well-intentioned. And Jess, there's something you said on the podcast that I noted, and I still kept it when you said that your company was they were creating magic and also data-driven. And I think both of those things of having a higher calling, a higher purpose, realizing there's more to create than just dollars and cents, but at the same time being really, really accountable. And so when we meet these people, we hear them, we know them, we see them, we feel like we're among our brothers and sisters. And Bill, we haven't had a chance to commune with you as much, but I just want to, first of all, just say that we see you guys, we appreciate what you're doing, and want to acknowledge how lucky HQ community is to have you. Because we know there's other co-working spaces that are right now just, they've lost their soul trying to stay alive. And you guys not only have not lost it, but you're just infusing it in everyone. So one, we just want to thank you for being who you guys are, let you know that we recognize you, that the one of us, and again, to hope to share the gratitude through the whole community of what the three of you guys are doing.
Yeah. So today's event, today's event is called Being a Founder in a Time of Crisis. And I actually want to start the conversation by pivoting even that, because you three are much more than founders. It's one thing to found something, it's one thing to start something, but what this moment calls for is being a leader in a time of crisis. Not just a founder, anyone can found something, but to actually lead through a time of crisis and to take people from one side to the other is an entirely different conversation. And it's what is called for in this moment. So I gotta call you up. You tried to sell yourself short with just calling yourselves founders in this moment. You're much more than that. You're leaders and you're leading in your community, and I applaud you for that. I'm going to share one quick story before we get in, just on the importance of this moment. So there's this tribe in Ethiopia, one of the last nomadic tribes in the world that has managed to survive. And the reason they were able to survive is this one piece of their culture that they've maintained, which is that whenever they see another member of their tribe, they will stop and they will share for an hour, 2 hours, just about what they've seen. So they'll say, okay, I saw the herds going this way, and I saw the wind doing this and the water doing that. What did you see? And they say, okay, well, I saw, this was going on over here and this is going on over here. From where we came from, this is the information. And they will together be able to make a much larger map of what's actually going on, boots on the ground, by sharing this information with each other. And then whenever they see another one, they'll say, okay, well, I saw this and the other person I talked to saw this. And together, that's how they've survived as a nomadic tribe, even to this day. And so today we have this opportunity to information share with our tribe and to continue these sharing resources with each other, sharing information with each other, even beyond this conversation. That's how we survive and that's how we thrive as a tribe, as a like-hearted, purpose-driven tribe of entrepreneurs. That's what it looks like. So let's keep the dialogue open. And even in the chat box, I see some great things going. That's what this is about, right? It's about information sharing. If you have resources, links, anything like that, share it in the chat box. And then these gentlemen are going to be sharing their information with you. So let's—
Justin, just to interject for a minute, for those of you that weren't on earlier, that when Jes mentioned this, we look forward to your questions. So please share questions on the chat box.
Great point. All right, so let's jump into some of the questions that were submitted by the community. Dave, you're up. Question number one.
Well, I want to know, we're all veterans of wars, even though you guys are all young. Everybody but me here is young. But you've been around long enough to do some crisis. So can you share with us what the biggest crisis is that you faced, and how when maybe the lessons learned from that as it applies to what's happening right now? Jes, maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, that's a great way that you phrased it, Dave, because I've been thinking about this a lot. And some of these panels and things are, hey, how'd you survive the dot-com crisis? How'd you survive financial crisis? But I was thinking about it, kind of reflecting on it over the last couple of days. And regardless of whether you've been through the dot-com crisis or the financial crisis, every entrepreneur, at least who started multiple businesses, even who started one business, has gone through some significant crisis in the past. But it may be just kind of single to their business. Everyone's gone through a major crisis in their business for the most part. And so actually, as I think back, it wasn't the dot-com crash or 9/11 or the financial crisis that were probably the most trying times that I had in businesses. There were more, I had back in 2004, my wife Brooks actually at age 23 had a stroke, and she was not able to talk or walk, and she was in the hospital, but yet she had just started a business. And so trying to help keep that business going, take care of her, help her with the recovery, going through that whole process was, probably one of the most challenging things that I've had to do in the business. I think the really interesting thing about the current time is we're all kind of experiencing somewhat of a crisis in our businesses together. In some ways, it's a lot more comforting because it can be lonely as an entrepreneur when it's just your business that isn't a severe crisis, or you're having a severe personal crisis and everyone else is chugging along and doing well. I think one of the silver linings and kind of nice things about now is we're all experiencing it together, and we can at least kind of share information a lot more kind of openly than we may in the normal course of business. So as I look back, I've probably got 2 or 3 of those kind of crucibles in my life. Actually, when I launched into entrepreneurship, it was after my dad had passed away when I was just a year out of college, and then Brooks's stroke, and then she also dealt with a colon cancer, as many of you know, last year when I was kind of in the middle of starting this next business. So that's the way I think about it, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, regardless of how long they've been in business or whether they've seen the financial crisis, can relate to the idea of something really changing in the business and all the emotions that go along with it.
And I think something, just what I know about you, which, we touch base every 7 years, I guess, like the locust or something, but it's that you're able to let go of the ideas that you had when these crises hit. You're able to kind of adapt to it, but whatever you thought was happening, you're not like, oh, it's got to go back to the way it was. And I think that's a characteristic that you have, that you personify, and also that just helps us as entrepreneurs to realize we don't go backwards. We just go forward.
Wow, well said. Jason, how about you? You're muted. But I bet you that first thought was amazing. Oh, you
lost to humanity.
It's too bad you guys didn't get to hear that. So skip that now and go on to the other stuff.
Yeah, for me, 2008 was relevant. I think because of the types of businesses that I was involved with. I mean, October of 2008, it's like the world stopped. I do think it's different than what we're experiencing now. But I can reflect back on those times. I owned a restaurant and I owned a real estate development company, and those 2 roles were literally stopped. I think the one thing that seems counterintuitive that came out of it was not to stop dreaming. I think dreaming is what got me through that, thinking about what the future was going to hold for me. And quite frankly, the reason why I moved to the Triangle, and I didn't know it at the time, but what led me to start HQ with Brooks, Jes, and Christopher was that experience I had in 2008. I took some time to reflect on what I was passionate about and what I wanted my life to be about. And I was good at making money, but I was missing a lot of other things. And it's amazing in times of crisis, like the things that really matter to me bubbled to the surface, and the businesses that I was running were definitely not what was getting me out of bed in the morning. And so, I pivoted, and I came out of that, and I changed what I wanted to do. I wanted to, be involved in more of a social entrepreneurial minded endeavor. And that's what I did. There's a lot of other learnings, but I think that's one that comes to mind.
Right. That it clarified your values. It's really interesting because we could even say, if we're tracing it back, that this exact conversation in this crisis was born out of the dreams that came out of your last crisis, and how it clarified your vision to even start HQ Raleigh. I think that's beautiful. Bill, how about you? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just quickly, sorry, Bill, if I just add to that, I think I'm using that same mentality now, right? So, HQ is definitely, people can't come into our physical spaces right now, or at least they're limited in coming into our spaces. But to our team, like, how do we improve? How do we become better? How do we offer value virtually? What are we going to look like in a year? What do we want to be as an organization in the future? And that's really motivating to me. Yes. Sorry, Bill.
Jason,
Bill,
I just want to say something to that too, because we talked about this, that when you are purpose driven, it's like all these things from the past, they make sense. It's like you see, oh my gosh, this is actually serving me in this moment. Where when you're not purpose driven, they just seem, they can just seem like random, just like random events.
Yeah, Bill, how about you?
Sure. So, what came to mind immediately with that question was when I found out that I got a call years ago, probably 12 years ago, when I found out that more or less my mom was no longer going to be able to operate independently on her own. And it was a call, the first time I got one of those calls, it was in the middle of a work day, and I had to put down what I was doing and drive an hour to get down and find out what was going on down there. And then you begin to realize, you've got all these thoughts running through your head, what's going on. And then, I had work going on in the back of my mind, still cycling. And you kind of had to put things to the side, handle the new problem that was occurring, the new change in the universe. And that became a permanent change in my universe. And so I, over time, had to cycle that in. There were a number of drives, some in the middle of the night, some to ER visits, over and over again until things settled into what I would call a new norm for me and, frankly, the people who work with me on my team at that time. So that's kind of the first one that pops up into my head. So much like Jes, it was kind of like that personal boom that hit that also interacts with your business life. You very quickly learn to put your business life in the background and deal with the things that matter the most. The next one that popped into my head that actually, again, related more on the business front, but it was still very personal, was a trip some years ago when my partner and I were down in the Caribbean, and it was the night before we were about to go and get on a sailboat and disappear for a week. And we were going, I was going off grid, offline, and the expectation was that my co-founder would be able to handle things. We had always been able to trade off. He would go on vacation with his family. I would be in and handle it, and vice versa. So I get a text message from, I can't even remember, but I believe it was him, basically indicating that his wife was in the hospital. And I started digging in and found out that she had had a pretty severe, medical event in her life. And as a result, he was going to have to drop out. And again, I had to go through the mental recalibration of, do I get on this boat tomorrow? And how do I get on this boat? Will the operation still keep running, or do I need to start calling American Airlines to try to figure out how do I get back to Raleigh so that we could keep things moving ahead while he took a moment to go and deal with his own personal crisis, which was a family crisis for all of us in the end. And what was amazing about that particular event was I was able to talk to some of my other team members at that time, and they basically chimed in and said, we got this. We got this. You get on the boat. As long as you're willing to dial in once a day and check in with us, everything else will be all good. And so my co-founder was able to step away from the business. I was able to actually take that much needed time away with my partner. And the business, guess what? Survived, and Rome didn't burn. In fact, we came back from the trip and got re-engaged. And the big thing we learned in that lesson was that we had built that resiliency into our business in the form of our team, and that we could both be out of pocket, out of decision-making process, and actually keep going. So there was some great light that came out of all of that activity on that front. And the same is true with the situation with my mom years ago. It was great to see that the team was able to continue executing on the business front while I was able to take the time out to go and do what I needed to do. And kind of the last point I'd put on all of this around being a founder, most people know me as a very stubborn and independent-minded individual. And to some degree, I would like to believe that I structured my life in a way that it is in order to be able to go and have these to deal with these type of situations. I didn't know they were going to come, but in most job situations and most employment situations, you couldn't do the things that I did during these periods and be able to do that. There would have been demands placed on you. You might not have had the strength of a team, and. So that's something, I think is important to sort of realize that you build those resiliency points into your life, whether you really know it or not, by how you live your life.
Yeah. And one thing that keeps coming up out of these conversations, you mentioned it at the start of your piece, Bill, and it seems to be a theme, the new norm. I think there's this idea of things going back to normal, and that doesn't seem like it's an option after a crisis. I don't think you go back to the way things were. I think you find the new light and the new normals coming out of these things, and even getting to see the strength of your community that you were able to lean on, Bill, and the strength of this HQ community that you can really lean on these people. I think for me as an entrepreneur, just being able to be held when you need to be held, you know, actually reaching out for help and having that help is one of the hardest things for me, because I just want to solve things by myself all the time. So just great examples of 3 vulnerable leaders who are leaning on their team in these times. So you actually, all of you answered questions 1 and 2 for us. So I'm going to leave the second one alone, which is just the idea that as entrepreneurs, we're always solving problems. That's literally what we do for a living. And so you, Jes, I think you really led with that very well. So we're just going to leave that one alone. The next question that I have for you is, what keeps you grounded? What is the one thing, get as deep, as vulnerable as you can in this moment, for you internally? What keeps you grounded? Is there a practice? Is it, is it meditation? Is it family? Is it like, what's that thing that keeps you anchored and grounded during these times of turbulence? Or if you were going to use a tree analogy, your roots, so that when the wind's blowing, you're stable. What is that for you?
Yeah, so I can't really quantify it. I would say that probably a combination of 2 things. One is I've just naturally always found myself to be a person who is calm in times of stress, and so it wasn't really attributable to any practice I put in place. It's just kind of what I learned about myself when I got into some crisis situations. And then the second is I've had a lot of crisis situations in my life, and building businesses for a long time. And so I think I'm just kind of pretty tuned into that mindset, and you become, it's easier to take it in stride when you've been through a lot of that and worse many times over. And
you've developed your crisis muscle, right? Like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Jason, how about you?
Yeah, I think family is a grounding force. Family and friends are a big part of me and who I am. And so, those are the things that I think are most important. But obviously, employees and people that I work with, now that what I do is much more aligned with my personal values, that's really important to me too. It's interesting. I'll stand with this. I'm similar to Jes. Like, I freak out over a toilet paper holder that doesn't have toilet paper on it, but in times like this, I'm really calm, and it's just because those things that are important in my life, I know are there and they're steady, and we're gonna be okay.
Yeah, well said. How about you, Bill?
Yeah, for me, it's really, I think the word, I talk about it, keeping it in context. These are bad times, but, I posted a blog earlier over the weekend around the fact that, 5 million people a year die in Africa from starvation. People literally worry about walking to wells to get water, and worry about people jumping out and cutting off their arms or raping, their families. Will they be there when they return from the well? So, I try to take a big step back and look at all of this stuff in context and say, okay, really, is it that bad? Is it, that bad? It's bad, but contextually, we all need to take that step back and keep ourselves calm inside. And that helps me remain fairly calm. And then I have all of the other pieces that were already mentioned as a part of that. But I think, again, I try to just look at this and keep it very much inside, the bigger picture.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on this a little bit, because what the one common denominator I hear from you 3 and so many other people is you guys are still remaining aligned with something, whether it's your values, your vision, it's your purpose. And that alignment is what you come back to repeatedly. And of course, that's different for everybody. Everybody has a different, compass point or polar star. So what advice would you give for just if you give like general advice is how do we, because again, you guys are holding on to your values, other people lose theirs. Okay. Yeah. So what advice could you give for just general, how people can kind of find and hold on to and stay aligned with why they got into this business in the first place.
Yeah.
I would tell you, maintain your true, find your true north if you don't have it, and then hang on to it for dear life. Understand why you started the business. And then also at the same time, you also should constantly ask yourself the question, can you continue? You got to ask yourself the hard questions. And can you continue on in the environment that you're in? And there's no shame in the idea that if things have completely, uprooted themselves and changed so much, that no matter how many pivots you might be able to execute on, you can't accomplish the original mission inside this current vessel. Doesn't mean that you can't actually still accomplish the mission. It may just mean that you have to change the vessels. And, everyone knows I'm a big fan of Pirates of the Caribbean. So the example I give is, the Pearl got destroyed along the way, but the crew left and took another boat. They eventually got the Pearl back. The vessel you're in isn't always the vessel you finish the mission in.
Well said.
So you really do have to keep that piece in mind.
And I think when the mission is central, it does allow you that calm and that peace to be able to navigate some of the harder times. So even with HQ, that you are not a physical space as a mission. You are a community as a mission. And so now how that's adjusting in this moment is that you're rallying the community and you're able to pivot. And so I think knowing your true north, I like how you said that, knowing your actual true north mission, you're willing to actually change the vessel or how that gets played out without being too attached to how it's supposed to happen. Great question, Dave. What were you going to say, Dave?
No, I was just going to, actually, I misquoted Nietzsche the last time this came up. I'm going to quote him right this time, I think.
Oh, good. Not often you get a quote
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
Last mistake, but he said a man that has a why can endure almost any how. And I think that's what we're doing is if the why is primary and then the how is, you guys are nimble. I mean, that's one thing that I see with all three of you. You guys are just nimble, you hold things lightly. You hold your values tightly. You hold everything else lightly.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So here's what I want to know. Let's get really practical. For an entrepreneur listening to this piece right now, what is one do and one don't in terms of adapting and pivoting in this moment? Is there anything just really practical, really granular, like do this, don't do that? Let's start with Jason on this one.
I think one do is stay focused. One don't is don't bullshit people.
Okay, tell me more about that.
And I assume that's even after the virus is gone, we're still going to hold on to that one, right? That's a long time.
Yeah,
I think that one has some legs to it.
Yeah.
Listen, I think there's a way to be transparent with your employees and your community that's real. You don't want to scare people, but you want to be honest about the situation so that everybody is clearly aligned and knows where we're headed, right? And so the focus part is, hey, we're in time of crisis. These are the things we need to focus on, get everybody's buy-in. But you want to be honest with people. You don't want to bullshit them. Hey, things could get better. Things could get worse. I'm here for you. And let's keep moving forward and let's do the best we can do to improve ourselves and the organization and care about our community and do all the things that we know are part of our values and are important. But I don't want to bullshit them. I want to tell them everything's going to be okay. And, you need to be honest with people.
Yeah, well said. Bill, what do you think? One do, one don't.
Yeah, one big do is to, I think, every founder, every entrepreneur should ask themselves the honest question, do you have the resources to make it through this thing? I'm big on this hunker down or lean in mode of thinking right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot endure the win, and again, this is not a normal win, so it's not shameful to say it, but I think you should have that honest conversation if you've not already had it. And if you can't, then, exit with grace and style. There's a certain way to do that. I've seen entrepreneurs do it both ways. So I think it's important, a big do right now is to ask yourselves, can you survive? If the answer, and regardless of what the answer is, the other one goes back to something that Jason just said, be open and honest with your team. If you actually are going to lean in, make the decisions, make the bet, make the gamble, whatever term you want to use, and get on with it. Don't spend a whole lot of time hesitating or being paralyzed. Get on with doing what you need to do. Hire, raise funds. All of those things are actually still possible in this storm right now.
Yeah, which we're going to touch on in detail later as well.
Yeah. So I would tell you, if you make the decision and then get on with it.
Yeah. Jes?
Yeah, so I'll give you 3 quick do's and one don't. So talked about this a little bit when we were chatting a couple of days ago, but my number 1 do is over communicate. And so basically, whether that's with your employees, with your investors, with your customers, what I did, kind of first thing I did when we were starting this work from home a month and a half ago or so was I looked at every meeting on my calendar that was recurring, and I doubled, tripled, or quadrupled it. So if we usually had a monthly company meeting, I changed it to weekly. Meetings I had once a week would be twice a week, and so on and so forth. I think communication is really, really important in this time for everybody. And I think I see Gabe there in the chat, transparency, very similar. I think just making sure you're communicating, and part of doing this session today is the same thing, also communicating outward to your peers at other companies and the community. So that's a big one for me. The other one is speed of decision making. In times like this, it's kind of a wartime environment, and you need to, decisions that you used to make in a week, you need to make in a day. Decisions you used to make in a day, you need to make on the spot. It's very important to adapt to the pace of change in the outside world and make sure your decision making matches the pace of change in the external environment. Yeah, and then last do for me is go back to your core values in your company, and really really use your core values as a tool in this time. The don't is real similar to what Bill said. Don't spin in circles. It's all you can do is make the best decision you can with the information you have and move forward. And I think spinning around is kind of destructive emotionally. It's destructive to the business. If you have to make a tough call with the business, whether that is letting people go or changing your strategy or doing something, I've seen across many companies over time that oftentimes what the decision is, and by prolonging it, you actually just make it worse for everybody. And so you got to just make the absolute best decision you can and move forward, and not just spin yourself into a loop.
On that note, Justin, I'm not sure if you saw the question from Brandon. We're at a point right now that may require us to make some pivots to survive, and wants to hear about our experiences.
Okay, I'm not. Where are you seeing that, so that I'm making sure I'm not missing anything here?
1204.
1204.
Brandon Kashani.
Okay. Well, let's go in that direction. So yeah, what is that question? For some reason I'm not seeing it. So if you're seeing those types of questions coming through, got it. All right. So Brandon, yeah, we're at a point right now that may require us to make some pivots to survive this period. I want to hear your experience making major changes in your company and some tips and advice for that. So obviously, staying on values is number one. What else do you guys think about that? Let's start with Bill on that question. How to successfully make a good pivot.
So yeah, I'll tell it in a story as it relates to GDC. So we are on our 3rd pivot as a business, arguably, from when we started it. When Charles, my co-founder, and I started this business, we were going to focus on just selling raw data. And we learned through that process that it didn't make sense for us to do that. And then we said, okay, we're going to do this secondary pivot. And it was an adjustment. So making a pivot isn't about doing a throw everything out and start all over again necessarily.
Yeah,
it's about making an adjustment. And that's all we did. We adjusted by about 45 degrees to really refocus on address verification in the cloud. And then we actually adjusted again by another 45 degrees to do identity verification in the cloud. Yeah. And that one, that took off. And that's the one we've stuck with. Don't think we'll be making any other pivots in the near term, frankly. But every time it was incremental as opposed to a massive, 180 turn of the ship. So I would tell you, any pivot that you make successfully, likely, the best case for success is to make that an incremental pivot as opposed to a massive pivot in the business.
Well, and what I like about even the pivot imagery is that it really is like your center doesn't change, right? So this can change, but the center of what you started out wanting to do or how you wanted to change the world doesn't actually change at all. It's the direction of focus that actually changes. So you got to keep your center in that. Jes, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say without knowing the specific situation, advice I would give is if you have some people that you really trust and respect, I would reach out to them and kind of get their input and advice. It kind of gets back to the communication and over communication. And then I assume you may have employees that are also impacted and the same kind of thing. I think it kind of gets back to looking at your core values, and then talking to people that you trust and respect and trying to get the best input you can to make your way through. And we'll be happy to, if you want to send more information after the session about kind of what you're going through to try to provide some more specific advice.
Yeah, and I just quickly add, I know a little bit more about the particular industry, and it's very relevant to amusement parks and those types of things, and obviously those things are being dramatically affected right now. But if you look at co-working and what we do, that is too. I mean, people can't physically use our space, and so maybe it's more of an adjustment to the time right now. In understanding the circumstances, but the new normal is different. So a big conversation we're having right now is, what does that new normal look like within our spaces? Mm-hmm. And how are we going to adjust to the times as things normalize with a new normal? And I think for Brandon, I think there's some similarities there, right? That business at some point in the future is going to come back online, right? So are there adjustments that you can make to position yourself to be in a better position once those things do come back online, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll create more opportunity for yourself if you're thinking in that way.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up question on that, because it's easy when you're making the pivot to look at what it is that the negative that's driving you to make that pivot. That's part of the data-driven portion that we're talking about. But how do you guys keep your eyes focused on the opportunity? You're pivoting towards opportunity. So how do you guys I know it's kind of a general question, but just what's your experience of looking for opportunity, finding opportunities, so that you're going back to Bill's, your due north is focused on positive and not just on what you're trying to avoid.
Right.
Our pivots, I'll jump in on that one. Our pivots were driven by money. We needed to make money. We were bootstrapped. And so it was very easy for us to see that we were going to be able to make more by making those incremental changes in our business. And once we actually started to see the repeatable funds come in the door in the forms of customers and revenues, we stuck with that and just drove harder in that particular direction. So for us, it was very clear skies, because we had a very simple driver that was driving us in that direction, and the need to actually feed ourselves and our families along the way. So that always is a great motivator.
Yeah, well said. Jason?
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Jes, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I've always naturally, kind of the first thing that happens to me after a crisis is I start to think about how I'm lucky. And I guess Bill kind of hit on it a little bit as well. What he's talking about is people in Africa that are starving and this kind of stuff. And so I usually start by thinking about how it could be so much worse. Like I could be in a different industry that's getting completely decimated, or even if I was in that industry, I would think, well, I'm glad I didn't grow faster because I would be even in more trouble. Or I always try to start from kind of a point of view of gratitude. And I'm lucky myself that that's just naturally where my mind goes, is like, wow, I'm really lucky that this is not happening to me, even though a certain thing that may be challenging is happening. And then I try to think about, like, what are the ways that this could actually end up being the best thing that ever happened to me. And again, that's just natural, not something I force myself to do. And usually I can come up with a lot of ways. And I think, just in this particular situation with the working from home, it's never something we would have probably had prioritized as something to do as a company for my own business, Levitate. But there's all kinds of really interesting things that we've learned from it about how we're collaborating on chat and realizing that people can be productive from home. And there's a lot that when we do get back into the office that we're probably going to change for the better, that's going to be with us for a long time in the company. And so, and we've learned a lot about ourselves as a team. And so I just like to look at things that way. Everything, there's opportunity in kind of every situation. And so that's how I like to think about it.
And Jes, that's so cool, because that is what our ears are tuned because we're talking to people like you all the time. And the gratitude is one, just the natural gratitude, not like, making a list of all the things you're grateful for as a discipline, but just, maintaining just innately in that. And then I think just the confidence in the opportunity, just really having that deep seated confidence in the opportunity. And the third thing that I just throw in there that Justin and I saw, because we pivoted, we had a general entrepreneurial podcast, and then, we had a big event planned and the event had to get canceled. We realized, okay, what's the opportunity here? And we realized it was to serve. And I think that's one of the ways, I think that's where the daylight comes through the clouds as well, is when you start figuring out, where can I be of service? And then, it can be driven by the money and you'll find the service or service in the money. But I think that's one of the ways I think that you particularly are just inclined to think that way. And that's where the opportunities come from.
Well, and Jes, you brought up a really great point. I love how you rephrased it even in terms of a question, because the human mind is literally built to find answers to our questions. So for example, you could say, okay, why does nothing ever work out for me? And your mind will actually search, that's its job, like a little Google search. Why does nothing ever work out for me? Like, oh, well, because, you're a shitty person. Whatever, like it will find something, or like, because no one likes you. That's its job, right? So you ask a shitty question, you get a shitty response. Sorry to use shitty so much, but it just felt like the best word. And Jason started it when he said bullshit. So I'm gonna call him out there. When you ask a more empowering question, and I loved yours, which is, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to me? Your mind actually has to start searching now on the Google search bar of your brain and say, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to me? It's like, oh, well, I might come up with new ways to work with my team better. There might be, whatever those opportunities, or how can I serve, Dave? Like, I love that question and where that leads you. So I would just encourage you to come up with a better question during this time to make your mind answer it, because you're going to find those opportunities in that. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys have it covered. I just, so we can move on to another question. I'll just make a quick comment.
Yeah.
I find, when things are going really well, sometimes it can be harder to jump into something new or to jump into another opportunity. When things are challenging, at least for me, I find it a little easier to take some risks and focus on opportunities within an organization that maybe is having some success. And maybe you don't want to take focus off of other things, because it's working well. And in our case, we wanted to focus on this virtual platform for a long time, but the immediacy of our physical spaces created a capacity problem. And now we have an opportunity to really focus on something we haven't necessarily been able to focus as much on.
Yeah.
And so there's a silver lining there.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing again, just to acknowledge what you guys are doing, because our experience, but the most important thing you do is hang around with positive people. Hang around with positive people that are asking, that are posing the right questions, not the wrong questions. And again, this is part of what you guys are doing with HQ, is providing that platform where we can be asking the right questions, the positive questions, and be supported, and minimizing the people that are just saying, this is the end of the world, because that's not going to be too helpful.
Right. So let's get to a couple questions from our listeners here. One was, where is my family and coffee shop? So it's called Nolia, named after my daughter, Magnolia. And it's in Durham, North Carolina. And even just to go back to the opportunity question, we just launched today an online platform where we're providing resources for parents who are struggling during the quarantine right now. So it's like all story times and educational pieces, because the question for us is, how do we stay relevant? So for all businesses like an amusement park, things like that, where we're a physical gathering space, it's a coffee shop. The question is not necessarily how do we just make money in this time. That's kind of a sub question for us. The big one is, how do we stay relevant and gain market share? Because there still is an opportunity to invest in the relationships between us and our customers, and us and our greater community, which is what we've done, and it's already growing our reach in Durham, which has been really fun. All right, Jes's point about looking for opportunities. Okay, here, and this one leads into one of our big questions. So there's a sentiment out there that COVID has chilled investor activity in startups. Do you think so? Do you know how long that'll last? So let's go into the funding conversation. Finding funding in this time. What are the opportunities? What are the barriers? What does that look like? And I know, Jes, you've done a lot of research in this, so why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be totally transparent, I would say the way I look at this kind of situation we have going right now with coronavirus is, we've got kind of phase 1, which is the lockdown phase. And then we have phase 2, which is going to be probably a long-term recession, / depression that we're going to be in for a period of time, until there's vaccines and kind of things like that. And then there's the phase 3, which is kind of, we've gotten past that, and then how has the world and kind of society changed permanently, if at all, by this? I think in the phase 1, what I see in terms of investor activity is that everything is pretty frozen right now. I think over the next couple months, there's not going to be a lot of new investments happening that were not already in process, and kind of, there's a couple of investments that have been announced recently, but those were in process and probably at the finish line almost before this stuff happened. So I think things are going to be pretty frozen for the next couple months. I also think for an entrepreneur, it's not the best timing to, even if you were to get investment, to do it on favorable terms. I think you're probably going to, if you need to get an investment now, it's probably going to be on fairly unfavorable multiples and terms and things like that. And then, I would expect that over the next year or so, again, investments will happen. Terms probably will be not as favorable, but it will bounce back. I remember from 2008, 2009, the multiples and valuations and acquisitions and everything like that pretty much bounced back within a couple of years of the financial crisis, almost back to normal by the end of 2008. Everything was kind of back to normal in the investment world. So that's kind of what I see as frozen, then, unfavorable multiples for a while, and then it will get back to normal.
Anything else anyone else would like to chip in on that?
Sure. So first of all, I wrote a check less than 3 weeks ago. So I think fundraising is still definitely going on. I've been talking to VCs, strategic investors, actually over the last 4 weeks. And I think the key statement, the thing I'll sort of synthesize down is, funds that have either prior relationships with you and or funds that have raised money and have to put that money to work, they're going to put that money to work. So, I'll give that as a positive. Your negatives, though, are investors tend to like to meet you. in order to write a check. And so, of course, this universe makes that much more challenging. When you have airlines that basically are almost non-functioning at this point, it's not as easy to simply hop on a flight and go to Chicago, LA, New York, wherever one may wish to go to meet an investor. So yeah, that universe has changed, and you should recognize just the sheer fact that that's changed. The other thing, though, that, frankly, I think it's important for entrepreneurs to hear and understand when they're pitching or talking to angels is you are now being compared to the broader market, meaning it's just as easy for me to buy Boeing shares right now and probably see a significant upside as it is to invest in the average risky deal. And that's important for you to sort of recognize and put into context when you're talking to an investor, because the financial returns right now, with the market being in the situation it is, you can buy a broad basket of a lot of interesting things out there for a lot less than you could 6 weeks ago. So you do have to realize you're being compared to others, and you have to come up with other compelling pieces in your message to get an investor on board. So I think it's important to sort of think about those, but those are the bullets I just sort of stroked out a moment ago. There are a lot of other comments I could probably make on that area, but those three suffice.
And
So I know we're running close to time. Dave, what were you going to say?
no, just real quickly, Jim Verdonic of Innovate Capital, who actually made our introduction to HQ, we're going to be posting a podcast soon. He's talking about some of the innovative ways that investors are going, including some rev share agreements. So there is some adaptation going on, and we'll be posting that as well, and invite people to listen in on that.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Great point. So we do have a few more questions that doesn't look like we'll have time to get to. One I did want to address, because we didn't talk to these humans at all, which is people that are in the midst of starting a company, or they were about to do that. One quick piece of advice that I would lend, because we deal with a lot of startup and early entrepreneurs as well in our business, Dave and I, is work on your business. Get your stuff tight. Use this moment to really be positioned for success on the backside of this. And I know it's hard because you just want to get going and you want to be jumping in, but develop your systems, get everything in place so that you're tight when you're going. Any other quick pieces of advice for them? And then we got one more closing question here.
Yeah, I've got some. I think I actually think it's a great time for entrepreneurs that are at the very startup kind of stage of their business. In a lot of ways, I think it's better to be starting a business from scratch right now than it is to have been running a business that you have to pivot and adapt and change, because you have a blank slate. You don't, and the world has changed tremendously. So existing businesses were really designed for the world as it was a month or two ago. The world looks like it's going to change significantly moving forward. And so, to have that kind of blessing of not having many or any employees, not having existing customer base, to try to deal with that kind of innovator's dilemma, I think it's actually a really good opportunity. I've had several startup ideas where thinking like, wow, there's a whole category of software, there's a whole category of services now, and the way things are moving based on this, that if I were starting something today and I wasn't doing my current business, would be pretty cool opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so I would urge entrepreneurs with ideas, be flexible with your ideas. Your idea may need to completely change based on what's happened, but you've got that flexibility. And starting in a time like this, we were talking this morning in Greppy with me and Scott Wingo and Joe Colopy. It's also a great litmus test, because if you can sell things to customers now, then you really have something. And then as the times get better, your business is really going to thrive. And so, yeah, I would really encourage entrepreneurs who are thinking about starting to embrace this, as some of the most valuable companies were started during recessions and kind of down times. And so I think this is a great time to start a company.
All right, last question before Dave Gold lands this plane here. So what one resource can you recommend? So whether it's a book, a podcast, something, I mean, obviously our podcast is phenomenal, but from you guys, what one resource would you recommend for this time, something that people can sink their teeth into and come out as better leaders on the other side? Bill?
I would actually tell you that resource is your founders community around you. I think you've got so many people who have so many different experiences who are solving bits and bytes of different pieces of the problem right now, that having more conversations with other founders will give you a lot more value than just sort of your average leadership guy or your average podcast or anything like that. Interact with people who are living in the chaos and see what they're doing. I think that's the best possible resource.
Yeah, which thanks again for putting this on HQ. This is, I mean, a perfect example of that. Thank you. All right, Jes?
You know, for the last few weeks or last 2 months, I've actually found a lot of value in Twitter as a resource, a good way to get exposed to a lot of different points of view and pointing me to articles that I've been reading to kind of get educated on coronavirus and how it's changing society. And I don't agree with everything I read, but it's a great way for me to get exposed to different points of view.
Interesting. I haven't been on there in a while, so okay, I'll hop back on, Jes. I'll see you on there. Well, Jes, what's your
Right.
Twitter handle?
It's Jes Lipson. Yeah, I don't post much, but I follow a lot of different, you know, entrepreneurs and VCs and other folks. So that's where I get the most value.
Yeah.
And obviously for me, community is a big one, but the other one I'll add is find a gray hair. You know, find someone that's been there and done it. You know, I'll be 46 tomorrow, but I remember in my, thank you. I'll remember in my 20s, people are so giving of me, you know, what I call gray hairs now. And I guess I don't have a lot of gray hair, but I'm one of them. You know, I like to find time to give back, and there's a lot of people out there that'll do the same. And it makes you feel really good to have someone that's been there and done it, to spend a little time with you and guide you through tough times and offer their insights.
Yeah. And we had a question, where can we find our podcast? It's Enlightrepreneurs.com. So it's like enlightened entrepreneur, that high value type stuff, Enlightrepreneurs.com. Or the easier way is you can just follow me on Instagram at Justin Minott, and I post all the clips. Justin, JUSTIN MINOTT. All right, Dave, bring us home, baby.
A couple things. One is that we'll post something. Okay with you, HQ guys? We'll post something on the website too, link to that, including the great interview that we did with Jesse and Jason, which they knocked we knocked each other's socks off on that one.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So a couple things. One is there's some collaboration going on. I think be very interesting to your people. It's already proven. We are doing a dedicated HQ corner. So once a week we will be featuring one of your entrepreneurs and both talking to them about their business, and then the last 5 minutes we're going to solve their biggest problem and knock their socks off. So we've already had Lauren's already hooked us up with a half a dozen. You know, I'm already pushing Justin to add a second session, but we're going to see how the first season goes, sell that pilot, and go from there. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to Lauren at HQ or reach out to us, as Justin said, and we'd be happy to talk and see if we can get you on the podcast. You know, if it fits and works, get you on the podcast. The other
we're running those Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. So it'll be a live session, and then we'll post that as well.
Yeah, we've already. I mean, you got some great folks. I mean, you got 6 people in there, and I think, oh my God, if I had money, I'd invest in all of them. But anyway, more money, or maybe less sense. But anyway, the other thing is, as a gray beard, maybe not the gray hair, you have the gray beard. We are also, another joint event we're doing with HQ is the launch of our ebook, The Chief Morale Officer, and that is and Justin, you can kind of take that away too.
Yeah, so April 29th at noon, we've partnered with 3 other authors, so Dave and I and 3 other authors, to launch a really responsive ebook about the need for a chief morale officer. So the idea of building and investing in the morale of your team as an important form of capital really in your business, because we're seeing with a lot of the entrepreneurs we are interviewing and a lot of the ones that we coach, morale is one of the key differentiators as to whether or not these businesses are going to make it through this piece. Obviously having financial reserves, all those, but we're seeing if you don't have financial reserves and you don't have morale reserves invested in your team or relational reserves invested in your team, this is a really tough thing. So we're launching that ebook April 29th, noon, with HQ Raleigh. They're going to be the event host. And that we'll send out links and all that for that event, but really exciting piece there.
Yeah. And
Guys, if I can add to, outside of this great partnership we've just formed, in addition to that, we have a number, we have other content that we're going to be posting in a library
Beautiful.
on our website. And so we've got a lot of rich material that we're going to be producing and then posting in our library. So please stay tuned.
Terrific. All right. You can land the plane there, Justin.
Well, thank you. This has been beautiful. I love what you're doing. I love how you're doing it, and I love who you all are. Bill, it was wonderful to meet you for the first time today. Stay in touch with us. Stay in touch with the HQ community. We're all in this together, and we really care. And if you are a business who is looking to launch or scale, get in touch with Dave and I so that we can help you do that. We love doing it. We love seeing people succeed, and we work exclusively with purpose-driven companies, so higher value people. So if that's you and you want to make a big difference in the world, reach out to us.
Okay,
We'll
I'll one last word, because I used to be a trial.
Okay, yeah, Dave's got to have the last one. All right.
The last word is that one of the big everybody mentioned authenticity. And one of the tuning forks that Justin and I have is when people are talking from it and not about it. And I just want to thank you guys for talking from it and being guys that can talk from it. So thanks a million.
Awesome. All right. Take care, everyone. Stay up.
All right. You too. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.